Hello, I am Dakota Cross. I'm an environmental scientist at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and today we will be discussing our environment and how it really should be the one issue that unites all of us. So the environment undeniably provides us so much, culturally, recreationally, economically, but it also provides us something crucial: food, water, air. And that is what is at stake here. Right now, we are seeing so many symptoms of a dysfunctional environment that is affecting the food, the water, the air. We're seeing these 100-year droughts and floods that are happening every few years in San Antonio instead of every 100 years. And just this winter, we had a heat wave that was hitting the 80s in January and February, which was appalling to see. We're also seeing really unsustainable farming practices like pesticide use, which causes a lot of endocrine disruption for humans, amphibians, well, basically any vertebrate, any non-vertebrate, honestly. That's everything, by the way. We're seeing a massive amount of loss of biodiversity because of this and fertilizer use. And fertilizer use is causing these dead zones forming in the ocean, particularly the Gulf of Mexico, because of farms along the Mississippi River who use an excess amount of fertilizer, and all of this phosphorus from the fertilizer runs downstream and it comes into the Gulf, and then it causes this algal bloom. And algae bloom also, it has a lot of toxins in it. Not only that, but it also sucks up all the oxygen, and then it doesn't allow the sun to go down to the lower levels of the ocean, so no photosynthesis for everything there. So essentially, oxygen, sun, gone. Anything that can't swim away dies, and that affects the fishing industry a lot. So, and these effects basically cause like famines, which is really terrible. But the cost of the food is increased because the crop production is a lot lower. And then with the droughts, with the heat waves and such, it's going to cost us a lot more for our utilities. I know I've seen my utility bill go up so much just because of all of the heat waves that we've had, as well as pandemics because of habitat destruction. Wildlife is moving closer and closer to humans. There's more interactions between species causing diseases to spread. And then there's pollution. We see this a lot recently with the train derailments and the chemical plant explosions across the United States, where you're having residents who are reporting like chemical burns or holes in their lungs, and birds falling out of the sky. Really dystopian stuff, but stuff that's going to have long time damage to their air quality, their groundwater quality, the soil quality, and not to mention causing a slew of diseases and killing off all of the wildlife. There's also a massive amount of overexploitation of the land, which is, I would also say, was related to those previous ones. Apologies. But in West Texas in particular, we have a lot of fracking, which causes earthquakes, and groundwater pollution, which affects the livestock and the farmers who live off of that. Draining of aquifers past safe levels, which causes sinkholes. We actually have one on campus. I was actually appalled by the, sorry, I'm saying appalled a lot. I was disgusted by the court ruling that allowed landowners to use as much of the aquifer below them as they wanted, because everyone relies upon that. That is it's a common area almost. Really disappointing. So the core challenges here, I suppose, the core challenge, in fact, is capitalism at the end of the day. But the core causes right here are the habitat destruction, whether that's, for buildings, for ranching, for other agricultural purposes, for suburbs, for just parking lots. Not to mention pollution, which we went over a little bit. Actually, there is some migrations going on, so if y'all want to cut down on your light pollution, I recommend y'all turning your outside lights off at night to allow those species to migrate more easily. Overexploitation of resources, we went over this one as well. However, I would like to add that some climate scientists are saying that we'll run out of potable water in 20 to 30 years. So visit the San Antonio Water Services website to see some ways that you can cut down on your water consumption to stave off this. I know it's the big corporations who are causing most of it, but our daily choices also have an impact, okay? And then climate change really is just an amalgamation of all of it, particularly with like weather changes. And here is the biodiversity loss for you to visualize. We've been having a massive amount of extinctions. We're actually currently in the 6th mass extinction event in the Earth's history, actually. And this is incredibly dangerous. Essentially, we're losing a lot of genetic makeup for species. Well, we want as much genetic makeup as possible, so you have as much genetic variance as possible so that you can have more species surviving the extreme weather events that are happening and other negative climate events, essentially. But this issue is more so, it is a systematic issue and it should be addressed by the government, but unfortunately that is not what is happening right now. So we as a people have to come together to make conscious consumer choices that are good for us, okay? Because essentially when we give money to a company, we are paying for them to do whatever they're doing. So if we're paying for a corporation who's abusing the environment, we are paying for them to abuse the environment. And there are a lot of factors that go into that. Of course, you know, there are people who can't afford to make better financial choices or ethical consumer choices. But at the end of the day, you, the person who cannot, you know, make those economic choices, who doesn't have as much economic freedom, you are going to be the most affected by climate change, which is why it's so important for all of us to do it, particularly. So reducing your carbon footprint through diet, fossil fuel use, and water usage is probably the 3 easiest ways that you could do it. Cut down on your beef consumption if you're eating beef. If you're already a vegan, maybe drink less almond milk. It uses lots of water. You know, try walking or biking or taking the bus instead of driving. Don't have a lawn. Seriously, plant native species on your lawn. Don't have sprinklers. That's some good ways to cut down on your water. Also, vote for representatives who actually have your best interests at heart, who care about your future and your environment and your food, water, and air. You can protest as well. Boycotts, you know, boycott, put your money where your mouth is, or rather take your money out of the area. But you can also go on strikes, marches, rallies, do sit-ins. And you can also educate yourself about the environment. That is probably the most important thing that you could be doing. Yeah, I recommend reading Braiding Sweetgrass. It is a beautiful, beautiful book, but it also helps a lot if you're feeling really overwhelmed by the climate crisis. So here are the criticisms to how I would address it. How I want to address it relies on people being willing to educate themselves and being willing to change. And I think the greatest criticism to that is that people don't have that capacity in them, that they are greedy and that they are lazy and that they are prideful. But I don't think that everyone is like that. I know that as a culture, you know, we have this overconsumption mentality where we are having these clothing hauls and we have an obesity epidemic and we are overconsuming in every possible way that we could overconsume. And then we also have people that are like, I just don't have it in me to go out and do this. I'm like laziness essentially, which is terrible because I don't want to accuse anyone of being lazy, especially when we have such a culture that relies on pushing people to be overly productive. And then that pride of being like, well, I'm not part of the problem. I'm not, or the not wanting to take accountability for it, because we are all causing it and we should all be held accountable for it. And then when it comes down to capitalism right there, you know. It's a culture of capitalism and people don't necessarily have the time to educate themselves to make these changes when they're working over 40 hours a week on top of their daily commute, and then they can barely take care of themselves and their families. And then you have the 1% who, honestly, what is their excuse, you know? More visuals for you can look at the wealth distribution of the US. You know, we're all probably down in the middle or lower part, so keep that in mind. You should be feeling some sort of way about this. And then here is my response to the criticism. I do think that humans have an inherent good in them and that there is an intrinsic belief in all of us that we all have a right to live, including wildlife, you know? And I think that we might just take action because we have to, or we will see all of these terrible negative effects, you know? This is our only choice. You can take action or you cannot take action. So Alexander's question, what would it take to change my mind? Honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm an environmental scientist. I'm very passionate about this, and therefore I'm probably very biased towards wanting to do something for the environment in the climate crisis. But if there could be another explanation discovered that explains all of the damages and all of the recorded disruption to the environment that we've seen, I would love another explanation, especially if it was an easier problem to fix, you know? But I also think there's a really big danger to allowing climate denial to continue because it has been here for so long and it has held us back a lot when it comes to bringing change. And then also, a lot of it is just apparent. It's in studies, and I've seen it in person throughout my lifetime. So it would take a lot for me to change, unfortunately. I don't want to say unfortunately, because again, I'm passionate about this topic. But yeah, I mean, I would just need a better explanation, essentially. And then here's some sources, okay? If you're still watching, I really encourage you to educate yourself about this and realize that you can do a part. This is the most important thing for our generation and for the generations to come. Yeah, thank you.